and welcome to Media MD, your weekly prescription for media that you have somehow missed. I'm Reuben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And this week I will be prescribing you, Elliot and audience, that was the royal you, the collective you, a TV show. A TV show called Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency.
Okay.
Well,
I guess I'll start because I know a bit about this, so just set the ground because I'm not even sure about half of the info I have.
Okay.
This is the one with Frodo in it.
Yep, with Elijah Wood. Yep.
And it's on. I think it's a Netflix original, or at least it is here in Australia.
Yeah. So actually, you know what? Should have looked this up a bit, but I think the way it works is it's made by BBC America.
Okay. Yep.
So the American offshoot of BBC. So I think in America it airs there, and then after the season is finished airing there, it comes to Netflix in all other regions. So it's kind of like a collaboration between BBC America and Netflix.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. I mean, the same as like The Expanse and with sci-fi.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well, so because I think I actually was sort of at my parents' place when my dad started watching this series, and I was sort of paying half attention. So I think I've kind of partially seen the pilot or the first episode.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Elijah Wood was like a normal guy or something, and then Dirk Gently is the other guy who's taller than him.
Elijah Wood's great because he plays the same character in basically everything since Frodo, which is he's this normal guy who gets thrown into this crazy situation, and he's always the fish out of water. So he was in Wilfred, which I think we've mentioned on the podcast before, where he plays a guy who starts hallucinating that a dog is actually a guy in a dog costume, and he just kind of bounces off this crazy character. In this, he bounces off a crazy character again. It's just like he's always the same character, and I love him when he plays this one character. He's always so great at it.
Yeah, and then Dirk Gently is like this chaotic factor who said he was a holistic detective, but I think there was some joke because he never actually defined what that meant, and Elijah Wood kept asking. And then Dirk Gently had a sister or something, and she blew up a gas station, or she was like a holistic assassin or something. I remember, but I didn't really get far
going
enough.
with butchering your plot summary without even watching the show, because honestly you don't. Like half the stuff you said was like kind of right, but completely wrong.
Okay.
Why don't I just talk about? So, I feel good knowing that going into this, you know essentially nothing about it, or you know the wrong things about it.
Okay, because I was worried that maybe the pilot had me working with too much info, but it sounds like probably not.
Yeah. So this is a show. This is a season 1 at least of this show is a murder mystery, right? Kind of. It's a show that revolves around a mystery. And this character, Dirk Gently, and his friend, kinda, Todd, who's played by Elijah Wood, solving this mystery. And so the pilot just sets up a lot of questions, you know? Since it is like a season-long mystery, the first episode is just, here are all the questions, and here's all the stuff that seemingly makes zero sense to start with, and you just have to kind of see where it's going to go after that. So it's interesting. Okay. The first episode is, it's a lot of weird shit, and none of it seems to be connected. But the the catchphrase of the show is everything is connected, right?
Isn't that the Marvel Cinematic Universe catchphrase?
Yeah, it is. And maybe that's because they're both
do they actually
connected.
Do they actually live up to it in this show is the question.
They do. They do almost perfectly. Almost everything that's introduced in the first season is relevant to itself, with the exception maybe of Todd's sister's storyline, but that comes in a lot more in season 2.
Okay.
But yeah, so it's a how do I explain this? So you like Doctor Who, right?
Yep.
So imagine if Doctor Who was a detective, you know, instead of a spaceman.
Well, he's pretty much a space detective. I don't think that's a huge leap. Half the episodes he's just space detectiving.
Exactly. Actually, I want to tangent a bit here. You know, have you heard of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? I'm assuming you have, right?
Well, I was going to ask. This was originally a book by Douglas Adams. I think I remember my dad saying that in his pitch when he was trying to convince me to watch it with him.
Yeah, it's based on a book by Douglas Adams, or like 2 books. He wrote 1 book and then he kind of revisited it and wrote a sequel later. Okay. A book called Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, and it's based on it, from what I understand. I haven't read the book, but quite loosely. Like, the character of Dirk Gently is consistent across the book and the show, but it's not the same mystery or anything. It's basically completely original. And I think Todd and a bunch of the other characters are all original characters, maybe with some parallels, but
okay, yeah,
quite
that's
different.
fine.
But yeah, it is a Douglas Adams book adaptation, you know. And if you've read Hitchhiker's Guide, or you've seen the that one with Martin Freeman, the movie adaptation of it, you kind of know that you're in for a lot of weirdness, right? You're in for a lot of strangeness.
Yeah, well, because I read, I mean, this was years ago, back when I was like a teenager, but I read all 5 books in the Hitchhiker's trilogy.
Yeah,
and
I think there's like 7 or 8 now, aren't there?
I don't know. I think I read 5, and I'm pretty sure that's all there was back then, but who knows? And it's just like, it's really funny because I can imagine if Dirk Gently's even remotely similar. I remember once you finished, if someone asks you to sort of summarize what it was about, it's really hard because it isn't about like it just jumps from random thing to random thing, and they're all funny, but also not really that quotable because context is usually important. And
so I think
it's really hard to just talk about what actually happened in it because none of it makes sense by itself.
Well, that's what's interesting about this, and I don't know if this is something that carries over from the book, or if this is something that's just because it's an adaptation of it for a TV series. But it revolves around a central mystery. Like, there's a lot of randomness, and in the first 2 or 3 episodes, you're like, "What the fuck? All this stuff is completely disconnected." But there is a core mystery that is being solved that has caused all of these events, or most of these events, and that means that there is a thing, there is a through line and an explanation for all the weird shit that's happened, you know?
Okay, yep, sure.
So yeah, it's more, I don't know what the word is, it's more focused, I guess. So sure. I want to talk about this. I brought up the Doctor Who comparison because the first Dirk Gently book was originally written as a four I think episode arc on Doctor Who.
Okay.
That aired. It was a couple of episodes that aired back when Douglas Adams was writing episodes for Doctor Who, which he did for a bit. And then he kind of took some of the ideas that he had that didn't make it, or didn't quite like make it as he envisaged them, into the show and turned it into this book, right? About the first book was about a like time traveling detective who had become a professor, a time traveling guy who had become a professor. And this kind of fish out of water story of a guy meeting him and kind of they solve a mystery together. So it genuinely basically is like an episode of Doctor Who, the book at least. And this is an adaptation of that. So obviously those roots are still in there. The character of Dirk Gently is like a less competent doctor, I would say. He's got kind of the mannerisms of a doctor, of the Doctor, but he's not from the future. In this, at least, he's not like a super smart guy with crazy tech. He's just kind of a dude.
Yeah, sure.
Kind of a whimsical dude, and I
don't
want to explain what the concept.
A bit more of the mannerisms of the Doctor, but less of the just sort of Deus Ex Machina knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Oh, well, kind of. So. The concept of a holistic detective is interesting. The way it's explained in, I think, the first 1 or 2 episodes is Dirk Gently doesn't dust for fingerprints or look for clues. He just kind of follows his whim and trusts that the universe will lead him to where he needs to be to solve the case. Okay. And that's how it works. One of the core themes of this show is the idea of like holistic characters and them being this kind of factor, this force in the universe that balances things out. So Dirk Gently is this kind of like this universe, the force of the universe to right wrongs within itself. Like if someone fucks with the fundamental forces of the universe, Dirk Gently kind of by chance will be around to help fix it.
Okay, right? Yep, sure. That sounds very Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
It is. Yeah. It's bizarre, and I don't think I explained it as well as the show kind of puts it together.
Sure.
But yeah, it's a weird show, man. But I don't want to talk too much about the character of Dirk Gently because I think he's actually the weakest part of the show to me.
Okay.
In the same way that I think in Doctor Who, the Doctor when he's characterized as just his kind of whimsical self, he is the weakest part.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to go into that because I don't want to derail this entire episode with a 45-minute monologue on how I feel about Doctor Who and the Doctor. So.
Yeah, which is a roller coaster of emotions, really, isn't it?
Well, there's 50 years of history to cover there just to get started.
Yeah, so that's kind of my brief introduction to Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. It's a show about a mystery, and it's a show that satisfyingly resolves its mystery, to me at least.
Okay.
It's humorous, it's dramatic, it's got a lot of characters that I find very compelling.
I know, I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm a fan of, like, I enjoyed the Hitchhiker's books, and I've seen a couple of Douglas Adams Doctor Who episodes, and they were all right too. So, I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic going into this.
Yeah, good. I have a lot of things I want to talk about, but I think a lot of the weirdness in the show is best explored when you're kind of the perspective, you're seeing it from the perspective of Todd, who is the audience surrogate.
Sure.
And so it's like, the more I preface the weirdness for you, the less weird you're going to find it as you're watching it, which I think will detract from it.
Okay.
I will say, though, keep an eye out for Bart, who's a character that gets introduced and kind of has a subplot throughout the entire show. She's my favourite. She's the best. And I look forward to talking about how great she is when we get back in 2 weeks.
Okay, I'll keep an eye out.
I guess let's leave it for there. And in 2 weeks we'll come back and we'll chat about what you thought of Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency.
Sounds good.
Anyway, let's wrap it up there. So in 2 weeks we'll come back and we'll talk about Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency and see what we thought. Why don't you let us know what we'll be doing next week in our piece of off-week content, Elliot?
Yeah, well, so next week we're sort of going to be revisiting the world of Worm, which is something that you introduced me to about a year ago.
Episode 13 of this podcast, I think it was. So yeah, about a year ago now.
Yeah, and just talk about, there's a sequel to that as well as some other content. It's such a great community that it's actually popped out with some other things that I think are worth talking about. So it's just so you sort of general, you may also enjoy.
I think we have to call it Parahumans now, not Worm.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Not just
the
Worm
series
anymore.
is
the Parahumans series.
Yeah, you're right. But yeah, so I guess it's just you may also enjoy the rest of the Parahumans community and series based off Worm.
Yeah, cool. So stay tuned next week for that. And if you're watching Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency along with us, you can check out our discussion thread, which will be posted in the show notes, and leave your comments, and we might feature them next week.
Yep.
Awesome. So that's it for Media MD. Remember to follow us on Twitter and Facebook if you want to interact with the show. If you want to help us out, you can also leave us a review on iTunes, which we would really appreciate. That's a thing. I think it's called... Is it called Apple Podcasts now, or just podcasts? I don't fucking know.
Who cares?
Yeah, on iTunes. Let's just say iTunes. Links to all of those things are on our website, which is mediamdpodcast.com. Links to all those things, as well as links to the discussion threads, ways to contact us, and all of the previous clues for the Media MD ARG. You can help us figure out just who is Dr. MD and why is his cat so soulful. Elliot, why don't you tell the listeners this week's clue for the ARG?
17.
And we will see you next week.